Welcome to the Young Hearts Run Free podcast. I'm John Kelly.
And it's awesome to have you here, John Kelly. Thank you very much for your
Yeah,
time.
thank you.
Thank you very much for your time. We've got you for a short while. And what we would like to do is use that short while as the very best way that we can. So for people who maybe haven't heard of John Kelly, the runner and ultra runner, would you kindly furnish us with what brought you into the world of running and a wee bit about your running history, John?
I grew up running a bit, did track and cross country in high school, was good, never great at it, not good enough to run at university, and so kind of took 10 years off and decided I'd always wanted to see what I could do in a marathon at some of the longer distances. And so finishing up grad school, I just signed up for one. Went out and did it. Went pretty terribly, but kept thinking, I think I can do better than that. And so did a couple more, and things got better. And then I started to say, well, I think I can go a bit farther than that, and let's see what happens. So started exploring a bit the worlds of ultra running and triathlon.
Okay, right. Triathlon, that wasn't something that was on my radar when I thought about John Kelly. There you go. Brilliant. And then, so marathon distance, what was your first experience like of a marathon? And is that the only one you've ever done?
No, I went into it with the idea, maybe I can qualify for Boston. We'll see how it goes. And my training was horrible, not good at all. And I went out on that Boston qualifying pace, and then just the last around mile 18, just everything locked up. My legs were just cramped like tree trunks rooted in the ground at times, and I hobbled those last 8 miles, made it across the finish line. Could barely walk for a week after. And so then I decided, well, maybe I should actually do a bit of training and try this again. And so I did, got better, still missed the Boston qualifying time. And then I added some actual structure to my training, more than just kind of going out and jogging. Did another one 6 months after. So I mean, this is now a year after my first marathon. Got my Boston qualifying time. It was a while before. Well, I guess I did Boston. I did Boston dressed up as a video game character just for fun. Did a few others. Did London and Berlin while I was over in the UK. Again, largely for fun, and then this past December, I decided to actually have a real go at a marathon again for the first time, really since that Boston qualifier, where the marathon had kind of been my goal race and something I was focusing on rather than just doing for fun on the side. And so that was probably the fastest I'll ever run a marathon. I don't anticipate really putting the effort and the dedicated training into to trying to do better than that. So I'm pretty happy with my marathon journey there, and I'll stick to the mountains and trails for the most part.
Go, Stephen. You're, you're muted, man.
Amateur. Sorry. What video game character did you run against?
It was a Link from the Zelda series,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and so it was the Boston Marathon that year was 2 weeks after Barkley, and so I knew I wasn't gonna run a personal best or anything, even if I tried. So I thought, what can give me a good goal still and have fun. So set the Guinness World Record for fastest marathon dressed as a video game character, and it was tough. It was a headwind year in for Boston, and that Tunnock was like a parachute.
Oh man, you need a westerly for that day.
Yeah. Can I ask as well about the digits of your best marathon time? Just for interest, what's your best marathon time, John?
So that was this past December. It was 2:26:50, I believe. I had to work
Wow.
hard to, get those last few seconds under 2:27 because marathon times always round down, right? That's
Yeah.
the
Oh,
rule.
that's fine. You're in good company here. You'll be
Oh, yeah.
absolutely fine.
I'm
But
the master of the 59 finish.
but you know what? You've mentioned in there the word Barkley, and I think when people hear the name of ultra runner John Kelly, the word Barkley won't be too far behind coming into thinking. So, and we know that you've had, because of our thorough research, obviously, that you've had quite an experience in Barkley over the years. But can we speak a wee bit about your first interaction with the whole thought process? When did it first come on your radar, the Barkley Marathons?
So it really came on my radar when I was in grad school and getting back into doing some of the long distance backpacking and hiking. And so a lot of my ultra running, trail running, really, I came to it from that direction of kind of being out in the mountains for a long time and then thinking, hey, I'm going to start running rather than running and then thinking, hey, I'll go do it in the mountains. And so it was something that I learned about, read up on, and just thought it was this intriguing, crazy thing that was happening in the mountains right next to where I grew up. And I kind of thought, well, wow, that would be cool, but there's no way I could ever do that or ever even attempt that or get in or have a proper go of it if I did. So it was, yeah, not really on my radar as something that I would actually do. And then as I actually started improving in the marathons I was running and some of the other things I was doing, it kind of shifted from this crazy thing that I would never do to, well, maybe I could give it a shot. And so, yeah, it was actually, it was not long after that Boston qualifying marathon that I really started researching how to get into it and how to apply to it.
And what year was that, just to give it a bit of a timeline?
So my first Barkley was in 2015.
Cool. When you said that you were brought up near to Frozen Head, yeah, when you say
Yeah,
near,
yeah.
now I sometimes know when we talk in distances in the UK, 20 miles is far away, and whereas in America sometimes
Hmm.
220 miles is just down the road, as we'd say. What were you close?
Yeah, it's literally just right across the highway
Okay.
from Frozen Head. There's small farm. My family's been there for about 200 years. I have accidentally a couple of times, uh, when my navigation has been off, wandered on to Kelly Mountain, which is right alongside the Barkley course there.
Okay, so literally your backyard. Cool. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
I just love the fact that a couple of times you've accidentally you
yeah.
do it once as an accident, but
Well,
brilliant.
it was separate years and coming from opposite directions. It's one of those where you're going up, and if you just veer a little bit too far to one
Yeah,
side, you end up on a different peak.
yeah. And we've speaking on behalf of Stephen and I hope I can speak on behalf of Stephen and I, that there's a fascination with Barkley worldwide. I was a wee bit concerned this year that more was coming out from the actual camp and the race place than had been previously, but it's still got that mystique and it's still got that mystery that's there. But what's What's your thoughts about what it's actually like in the camp? We don't want to give away any secrets that Laz is going to be chasing us for. Do you know what I mean? But the actual feeling and the vibe that you get in the actual site itself.
Yeah, the feeling in camp itself has changed slightly since I first done it in 2015. There is a bit more. I mean, there's a small media presence there, normally a handful of people, and in general, I think just kind of more uh, buzz around it than there originally was, but it's still quite low key. It's still a kind of close knit atmosphere, and then once you're out there, of course, everything's the same as it's always been. It's you're on your own. But Laz has done a really good job, I think, of walking the line between keeping it as that sort of low key, intimate feel in camp,
Mm-hmm.
but providing a bit of exposure to let the world see what's going on there and to see the value of pursuing these big goals and big challenges and experiencing wild places.
Yeah. We were very, very fortunate. Friend of ours, Graham Kelly, got us in touch with Frozen Ed.
Graham
And that
Connolly.
Graham Connolly, sorry, I'm getting all excited.
You're getting all excited. Listen to John.
That's what happens. That's what
He's
happens.
drinking Irn Bru. What a legend.
Yeah, put us in touch with Frozen Ed, and we got an insight there, and that was quite phenomenal. And then we've also been lucky to speak to a couple of athletes who've been out there as well. So it's just brilliant to get access to your time, John. And you said that your first finish was 2017, which you became the 15th finisher of Barkley then, but you'd been there 2015 and 2016 as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was my third attempt.
Yeah. So this might seem like a silly question. It probably will. Was there, how much learning did you gain from the first 2 years, from 15 and 16?
A ton,
Yeah.
and part of that was Barkley specific, and part of that was just that first year in particular. I had no idea what I was doing in these sort of multi-day ultra running events. I hadn't had a ton of experience in those. Like I said, a lot of my multi-day experience was just backpacking and hiking. And these were the days, well, it was just before the Netflix documentary got big and the event got big. So it was a bit of a different makeup of the field at that time as well. And so I was pretty intimidated that first year and was kind of determined to latch on to some of the veterans out there and made a lot of rookie mistakes. The one that really got me was I thought that as with shorter events, I would just fuel off of gels and energy bars the whole time. I thought, well, this is the most calorie dense. It'll be the most efficient for me to carry. And after 30 hours of that, my stomach just said, no, 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 no more. We're not having it. And so I couldn't get any more fuel in the tank. Did that third loop basically with I think about one gel. Um, so that was a big learning experience. And the second year was really my uh, navigation learning experience. I got separated from the lead group by a briar very early on as the second descent of the first loop. And so I was on my own the entire time. I started my fifth loop that year. Um, didn't make it very far into the fifth loop, but it was basically the whole race. I was on my own with without any support or navigation help. So that was a big thing for future years and having that confidence and knowledge of the course.
Brilliant. And Sorry, Stephen.
No, you go for it, John.
No, I was just going to say it's about that building confidence and in yourself. And you're saying there that second time, 2016, that you spent a lot of your time on your own and navigating on your own. Is that something that you're comfortable with, or is that something that was that forced upon you that year? Is it something you've developed?
Definitely wasn't the plan that year. Jared Campbell was in the race that year. That was Gary Robbins' first year. There were a number of strong runners that again, my intent was very much to stick with them. As in the first year, I was with veterans the entire time, with Jamil Curry on loops 2 and 3, and Bev and Alan Abs on the first loop. So I was planning on repeating that, and it was definitely a forced experience to be on my own.
And sorry, on you go,
John.
Stephen.
No, what I was going to ask was, you've just said there around about how you latched on to experienced runners who'd been there before. Are you now finding that happens to you? Do people use you, not necessarily try and run with you, but pick your brain or try and find out? So
But
debutant this year, for example, maybe
yeah,
like somebody with a mohawk.
both for sure. And I'm good with that for the most part. It's fun to kind of be able to pay that back and be in the other role when I'm out there now. And honestly, that's the most nerve-wracking part of the race for me now, is early on that first loop where I kind of have this pack of people following me, and they're all just assuming that I'm going to the right place, that I'm nailing all the navigation, and I'm constantly like, a few of those descents are tough. And again, if you're just a little bit off to one side or the other, you're gonna miss, and then you're not gonna know where you are. And so I'm just, that whole time worried that I'm gonna mess up and lead everyone there off in the wrong direction and ruin their race. Fortunately, that hasn't happened yet. I've nailed the early descents when we've been in that position each year that I've been out there. So it's good. As long as people are kind of doing their part when they can, and trying to support the group and not being annoying about anything, then it's good.
Playing the tour guide. I'm waiting on 1 year to just lead them all a merry dance, just for the fun of it. You mentioned there the descents, and also the ascents obviously comes into the same conversation. John and I sometimes have difficulty, and we've spoken to quite a few people who've done the race, been on the ground, comparing it to something in the UK. Now, as somebody who has had the pleasure of running quite a fair bit in the UK, is there anything that matches it in terms of terrain or steepness, or that you came across?
Certainly in terms of steepness, the biggest difference are the trees.
Right.
Not only for having to worry about tripping over roots and hurdling blown down logs and everything else, but for the navigation, in the UK, for the most part, you have reference points. You can kind of see where you're going in the distance, whereas this you can't. Like, you are buried in the woods, and everything looks exactly the same. And so all you really have is the terrain under your feet and what's directly in front of you. So if you get clagged in the UK, that can be a bit of a similar feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's the biggest difficulty, and I'd say the biggest difference in the navigation.
So it would be like John and I maybe running around the hills here with a buff pulled over our eyes. Or, sorry, a snood.
Yeah, maybe not quite that bad, but it can get, well, and when it does get foggy at Frozen Head, it is that sort of thing where you especially if it's night. You know, you can stick your hand out in front of your face and you can't see it sometimes.
Wow.
That's
Got,
disconcerting, isn't it?
got to ask as well that that's before I get to that question. Let's go back to your first finish. That sounds good. Your first finish, which means there'll be
Yeah,
more than one. That means good.
yeah.
That's good. And the allotted time is 60 hours, isn't it? That you've got to. Is it 60 hours to complete the whole thing? Yeah.
Yep.
And so you finished. I'm looking at it here. 59, 30, 53. Did that feel tight for you then, or were you confident out on that last loop that you had it in the bag?
I was never panicked. I always knew that I had enough time, even with a couple of dirt naps that I took on the loop. Um, but you know, I didn't have time to mess up. I didn't have any insurance time, and you know, when you're out there, that's the biggest thing because there's always that possibility. Even once I arrived at the last book, and apparently, you know, from that point, all I had was easy trail to the finish, nowhere to really mess up navigation. But I was so far gone at that point that I kind of drifted off, and I don't remember what happened for 20 minutes. I don't know if I fell asleep or what happened. But I definitely had to buckle down and focus to get to the finish. And so again, on that last loop, I was never panicked or feeling like I needed to pull out some miracle to finish. But you put that in the context of the whole race,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, that's 30 seconds per hour.
Mm.
If I had moved, if I for each hour of the race, if I had taken another 30 seconds, then I wouldn't have finished.
Mm-hmm. You used a term there. I think Steve and I both noted it down. Dirt nap. That's absolutely a brilliant term, an absolutely fantastic term.
Yeah, I think, but the that 30 seconds comes down to things like how efficient you are at an interloopal race like that at turning around. Do you know?
I mean, even little things like being able to keep moving while you're taking food out of your pack or you're putting on a jacket. I mean, all of these little things really add up. I mean, even if you're just a bit slower at ripping your pages out of the book, it's going to add up.
Even that's got the mystique, ripping pages out of a book.
I
I
know.
love it.
I can imagine John sitting practicing ripping pages out of books after putting his hands in the freezer for a few hours.
Yeah, yeah, that's the worst of it.
Yeah, I can imagine the dexterity goes.
Can I also ask a question as well? I mean, we're saying you spoke about using gels and things, and if you're happy to share this, what's your preferred nutrition nowadays then? What are you using now?
So these days I've been using Tailwind,
Mm.
which has worked really well for me in terms of I've never had an issue getting it down, the liquid calories, as I have sometimes with other food options. And then also it's one less thing to worry about because the electrolytes are built in. And when you're out there and your mental bandwidth is steadily decreasing throughout the race, like there are very limited number of things that you can keep track of and think about at any given point in time. So if I no longer have to think about electrolytes, then that's a huge bonus. Outside of that, I've been using Supernatural Fuel. It's a startup in the UK. I affectionately refer to it as grown-up baby food pouches. Just a nice puree that again goes down easy. And I've started using Martin. I still don't know how to pronounce it. Morton, Malwerton. Started using their gels recently, which have worked quite well for me, and also they have some with legit caffeine in them. No, none of this little like 25 milligrams stuff. That you know what's that supposed to do for me? That they've got gels with 100 milligrams in it, and so again, that's one less thing to have to think about. I don't have to think about my caffeine pills or caffeine gum or anything else. I just pull out the gel and there it is.
And that, in terms of sort of like, hydration and the sort of traditional endurance athlete stuff, what about things like snickerdoodles?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say I think that with the addition of all of these things, whereas if you'd asked me a few years ago on the sort of engineered sports food, I would have been limited more to gels, and so the normal food would have been a higher proportion. I'd say that now
Right.
that sort of snack food is probably about 25% of my calories. Um, and yeah, that can be cookies. It can be, so in the U.S. we have a company called Little Debbie that the entire company exists for the purpose of making little miniature snack cakes. That was one gap in the UK market that I found, that there weren't many snack cake options. Cadbury kind of had these rolls that were somewhat similar. Um, but yeah, those with and cookies and occasionally some chips or crisps. I got hooked on salt and vinegar crisps while I was over there. Something that just really I can get cotton mouth on these long things, and something that's really strong can just kick my taste buds back into action, get the juices flowing again, and so that's kind of a go-to for those situations.
Was there
Brilliant.
a particular brand that you use, salt and vinegar?
Uh, no, it's I'm not too picky on that one. Whatever's
Cool.
available.
Okay. No, I just wondered because it's quite a thing. There's different levels of sharpness, I think.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, my wife and I, kind of every trip we went on over there, we would pick up a different brand to test them when we'd stop at the service station. But here, there's not as many options, so it's kind of just whatever's available.
Yeah, we'll maybe get on to it later, but I did love your musings and your Bill
Ah, yeah.
Bryson-esque observations about the UK. And do you use these the real snacky stuff more as something to look forward to, if you know what I mean, right? At certain times of a long effort, because, well, I don't know. I'm saying if you're anything like me, you're nothing like me, John. You start getting a bit sort of fatigued with the. You say that highly engineered. I quite like that way. Sports sort of nutrition, and it's sometimes like, for me, like a packet of minstrels or something like that actually can cotton on to. That's a nice little reward.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's good to have things that give you that sort of mentality where you're eager to get to it and eat it. I've started using the strategy of I'll go every other thing that I eat is kind of I'll have the tailwind the whole time, and then I'll alternate between like an engineered food and a normal snack food. And so I try to have a bit of a variety. Your body gets really good at craving what it needs, whether it's something that's salty or sweet or savory. Uh, and so you want that to be something that you're looking forward to, and also at support points where you can have a bit more variety. Things like rice pudding and pizza, pot noodle, something I had quite a bit in the UK. Things that you can't really take running with you, but they're great at support points. And I've really found that the way that I evaluate this now is after the race. If I look at all of the junk that I have left over, and I look at something and I still think, yeah, I'll have one of those. That'd be really good. Then that's a great option. If it's in my leftovers after the fact and I still want to eat it, then that passed the test.
That's in the next time.
Yeah.
I think that's probably one of the big tips of the year for people. If you still fancy it at the end of a big effort, then take it next time. Definitely.
Those boiled potatoes, John, that didn't make it. You know?
No, that's it's not on my list. So some of the instant, the like powdered mashed potatoes though, those can be good.
Mhm.
That comes, I think, from my backpacking days. That was one of my favorite things to take.
Can I ask about back in the camp? You're allowed the support, aren't you? Who was your support? Let's give them a shout out.
John Fagvaresi, who, if you watched the original Netflix documentary with Brett and Jared and John, John was the third finisher in that Netflix documentary. So it's huge to have him in supporting me there with his knowledge and experience, and he was also actually one of my crew, along with Julian Jameson, who now lives in the UK. On my first finish, but back in those days you were allowed 2 crew. Now it's been cut to just 1.
To make it a wee bit tougher, maybe. Yeah.
Well, I
Laz.
think just to reduce numbers in camp is the main thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, when we spoke to Larry Kelly the other week, he was saying that he kind of acts as a bit of a bouncer in the camp to ensure that people who shouldn't be there are directed elsewhere. Shall
Well,
we say?
I've
Maybe
never,
don't look at it.
yeah, I've never had to see that firsthand, but I imagine Larry does a pretty good job of that.
Love it.
Aye, he's brilliant. Okay, can we jump forward and we can go back if we need to, but can we jump forward to this year's Barkley Marathon and speak a wee bit about that, because you were almost an hour quicker than that previous finish. But I know from the coverage that we had this year that maybe the weather was a wee bit kinder, was it, this year?
Yeah, the overall conditions were much better than the first year I finished. The first year I finished, we started at, I think it was 1:42 a.m. and it was in thick fog, and we made a lot of mistakes right off the bat on the first third of the first loop. That it essentially eliminated our, I mentioned earlier, that sort of insurance time. Like you start off Barkley and you kind of have your planned speed that you're going to move at, and you know, if I move at this speed, then here's the extra reservoir of time that I have for making mistakes or taking a nap or warming up with a hot shower in camp. Like whatever. Here's my buffer. We basically lost that within the first few hours of the race because of how bad the conditions were and how we messed up navigation as a result. So we were playing catch up the whole time. This year was a nice morning start, and conditions were good. Conditions were good throughout. It got cold, especially that first night. Well below freezing. Um, up top, I'd say that it was probably in I mean, especially if you factor in wind chill, it was getting down close to 10 Fahrenheit, which I don't know is probably negative teens Celsius. Um,
Mhm.
so it was a bit tough at times. It was good that we had a group at that point. There were definitely some points where you know it was the person who had the most nimble fingers who was getting the pages out of the book, while the others were attempting to add layers and warm up. And so that wasn't perfect by any means, but having that compared to having fog and rain and mud and everything else that you usually encounter out there, it's definitely much better.
Is fog the worst thing that can happen?
I'd say that's the one that can most easily lead to sort of an instant disaster. It's the one that can force a navigational mistake
Mhm.
and essentially just end your race
Yeah.
right there.
Mhm.
The others, rain and cold, those are kind of more attritional loss. You're just over time becoming more and more miserable and slower to where eventually you simply don't have the time or the willpower to continue.
Yeah, the fog's a bit more out of your control, isn't it? So you just, it's much easier if you can see where you're going, to be honest. Let's put it that way.
I even had I brought I got a waist light this year to deal with the fog, and then I didn't really have to use it. But I think that, you know, I'll keep having that ready to go in the future. I think it'll make a big difference.
A great tip, because we've all been there with a head torch and it just bouncing back off the fog, and how disorientating that is. So yeah. There's a good tip for next year's.
And
but
sorry, on you go, John.
I was just going to say, also on the time this year compared to my first finish, I think that in general I was just a bit more fit and a bit better this year, and didn't make any huge navigational mistakes. We made some small ones here and there, and those can really add up. But there weren't any huge ones. So I'd say that's probably the biggest difference. I ended up, even though you know, on the 5th loop this year, I was generally kind of taking my time and enjoying it, and went into that sort of disaster prevention mode, where you're proceeding cautiously and methodically to ensure that you don't mess up something that essentially, barring disaster, was in the bag at that point.
I think you're the first person that we've spoke to that's ever used that term, disaster prevention mode. I like that. I like that a lot. Because in knowing, well, not knowing, but being aware of the environment you're in, disaster can come a calling very quickly and at any time, especially that far in, and sleep deprivation and all that. Can we speak a wee bit about that, actually, John? How do you train for that sort of sleep deprivation? How do you prepare yourself for that?
I don't think that you can train for it in the sense that you can make your body need less sleep. You can learn how your body is going to respond to it. You can learn what works best for you in terms of getting through it, in terms of sleep strategy. Some people do really well with power naps, you know, 15 minutes here and there. Others do better with one longer sleep. In Barkley, you don't have time really for a full, like, sometimes in these multi-day things, you shoot for like an hour and a half, and that's one full sleep cycle. But in Barkley, you don't really have time for that. My nap durations are typically either 15 minutes, 40 minutes, or an hour and a half. And I've found those are what work for me, and give me slightly different levels of alertness and recovery. In Barkley, it's always 15-minute naps. That's the most I ever get. I've learned a lot about my own my circadian rhythm. Like, I know that there are certain times of day where I'm going to have low energy and want to go to sleep and just feel awful. Before and after sunrise, late afternoon, early evening, like around 4 or 5 p.m., I know that I'm going to hit rough patches. And so I can be a bit proactive about that, maybe take some caffeine just before, to prevent that big lull. Or during it, I can remind myself of, hey, this is your bad window. You knew this was coming. If you can just get through this time period, then you'll be okay once you get out the other side. So overall, I'd say sleep training is more just about learning yourself more than it is trying to get better at not sleeping.
It sounds to me very much very smart to be looking at what you are rather than what and how you are rather than what you can be. You know, it's looking at that sort of that natural thing. And this has just popped into my head. Forgive me. This is what happens when John's brain kicks in. That waiting for the conch at the start, has that changed for you over the years since starting in 2015? Because I would, for want of a better term, I would be up to high do. I don't know if you understand that. I mean, it's quite excited, burning off a lot of energy. I'd be like that. Were you, and from 2015 to 2023, has that changed for you? That excitement waiting for that conch to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was most pronounced in those first 3 years. The first 2 times I did it, it was a really late start, like around 11 a.m. and it was torture, just all
Mm.
night. You're laying there thinking every single sound. Was that it?
Mm.
Is it about to start? Did I miss it? Am I
Mhm.
late? And just you can't sleep, and so you're laying there for 12 plus hours and hardly getting any sleep, and then it finally does go off, and when the race starts, you're at that point you're already a night down on sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, your
Mhm.
negative
And
equity.
yeah, and so that third year I finally got to sleep. Like I went to a nice sound rock solid sleep, and then he blew it like an hour later, and we had our 1:42 a.m. start. And so that was rough, but again, at least at that point I was closer to my previous
Yeah.
I was closer to my last good night's sleep than I had been the prior years
Yeah.
when we
Yeah.
started at like 11 a.m. So that was a bit of a silver lining. Um, and in years since then, I think that it is still a bit. You can find yourself a bit jumpy if you wake up in the middle of the night, and especially if you wake up at say 5 or 6 and he hasn't blown it yet. You're kind of lying there thinking, "Oh, he'll blow it any minute. I don't need to bother going back to sleep. Any minute now, he'll blow it." And next thing you know, you're still laying there 2 hours later. So it can still mess with you. But I've definitely gotten much better about not kind of worrying about the things like that I can't control. And it
Yeah.
has also been a big benefit for me sleeping before what I'll call normal events, where the start time is actually known. I mean, after going through that, it's no big deal to go to sleep before a race that I know when it's going to start.
Can I come in and just clarify something? You said that one of your plus points this year was you were a bit fitter. Did you say that you felt fit? Did you feel that you benefited from the road marathon that you did during the winter in terms of the sort of speed that came out of that?
I think that it's been a combination of things. I mean, I've been working with my coach David Roach for about 4 years now. He also coaches Damien, so that I think has been a benefit of getting me to continue to progress off of where I think I was on a bit of a plateau before.
Oh yeah.
So just in general, a few more years of base under my belt has helped. More experience in doing these multi-day events. But then, yeah, I think that having that speed and working on that speed and maintaining that top end is definitely a benefit, and that's something that a lot of ultra runners lose sight of, and especially in Barkley. They're kind of, for a few years at least, probably still became an obsession with thinking that, to train for Barkley, I need to go out and just power hike up and down steep hills all day, every day. And while that's, of course, an important part of the race, um, it's you lose top end, and really the key on doing those steep hills at Barkley is you have to be able to do them without hitting your red line. If you're going up those hills and you're kind of maxing out and hitting that top end feel for you, then there's no one can do that for 60 hours. So you've got to keep your speed and your top end high enough to where when you're going up those steep hills, you're not hitting it. You've got room uh,
Mhm.
Yeah.
above you there.
No, thanks. That makes perfect sense. No, I think it was just the point of, you know, you'll have ultra marathoners saying, "Ooh, I would never do a road marathon now," and you proved a 2:26 road marathon back in December is like night and day from what you're doing at Barkley in terms of the kit that you're wearing, the conditions that the surface that you're pounding, but that's contributed positively to a successful Barkley this year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I kind of had I feel like a lot of people's progression, I condensed it all into a few months where um, after last summer, I took a step back to recover and from some of the big events I've done the past few years, and then to start back with rebuilding that speed. And so I did a half marathon in November, and then a marathon a few weeks later, and then I did 100K a few weeks after that, and then Barkley. So I went all the way back to the beginning and built back up for it.
And I bet you looked at every data and metric associated with all your runs, which would have been a good few hours worth of analysis. No, thanks, John.
Do you want to say a wee bit about Laz? Do you want to say a few words about Laz? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, he's he's a quirky, enigmatic character for sure. There's definitely a difference between the persona that he is given by a lot of the media that covers the race, and I think a lot of that is what he intentionally gives them.
Mhm.
In terms of, he's often painted as this sadistic character, and everyone who comes and does the race is a masochist, and I really hate those terms in reference to this race. There's never pleasure in the pain, in the briars, or in it. There's pleasure in overcoming the obstacles that cause that, and that's really what Laz wants to do. He wants to give people the opportunity to take on a real challenge, something where failure is likely, and you learn your limits, because however far you get, that's where your limits are. They're right there, and he loves more than anything else, seeing people succeed, whatever their definition of success is at his race. So I think that it's a bit of an intentional persona that he puts on to make people want to put forth their best effort, and kind of at times even cast him as the antagonist, that gives them farther motivation to take this on, and to really keep pushing themselves when they're out there. So to sum all that up, I'd say yes, quirky, rough exterior, but very kind-hearted on the inside.
Brilliant. Thank you
Thank
for
you.
your insight. The last another question. This is what happens. Another question just popped into my head. How hard is your heart pounding when they're counting the pages after that last round?
So not very much at all. This year, I actually, the last climb is on a mountain that I spent a lot of time on as a kid. We'd take family hikes up there, and it looks down over where the farm is, and had just a beautiful evening and a sunset up there. So I got my last page, and I sat and enjoyed it, and counted my pages to be sure that I had them all. And so I double checked at that point that they were all there. So no concern. But
Brilliant.
that is always something that I find myself doing um, periodically during the race, is kind of uh, pulling out and opening my bag and thinking, did I really get that last page? Is it really in there?
Yeah.
And the irony of that, of course, is that I'm increasing the probability that a page falls out, or flies out of the bag every time I do that. But Fortunately, I've never had that where I came back to the gate and a page was missing to this point. I just had the incident last year where I had the pages in a waist belt, and I looked down, and the entire waist belt or bum bag, it had all come off, and I spent a few hours scouring a hillside looking for it.
Man.
Why did I not know that?
I know it's ringing a bell in my brain. The feeling in the camp. I know we spoke with Jasmine Paris, and she said there was an amazing sunset or sunrise. I can't remember which one, but she was saying that it was almost when she'd finished her Barkley journey this year, that while she was waiting for all you folks to come back and finish, she said it was just an amazing sense of sort of calm around the campsite because of the weather. Is that something you remember from this year, or were you too far gone?
Yeah, so that sunset, I assume what she's referring to then, if it was after she had finished, that was on my last climb, and
Okay.
so that was a great experience being able to take that in and appreciate it. And again, this year, kind of being fully coherent and not rushed in any way, compared to the first time I finished when it was cold and claggy, and I was pretty far gone in terms of my mind and my sleep deprivation.
Mm. There's a lot of factors. What's the difference between the two, John? Is it the weather? Is it your experience? Is it your confidence? Or is it just all of these things?
It's all of them.
Mhm.
It's I mean, having the nicer weather was definitely beneficial. The experience in knowing what to expect and knowing how to respond to the different situations that I would encounter out there, which in turn leads to more confidence. I'd say that's the biggest thing of just knowing I've got this, and from the outset of having that mindset of it's mine to lose rather than then I need to go and get it. It's starting from that position of confidence, which is built on the experience and knowing the course and the weather forecast at that point.
Mhm. Brilliant. And speaking about it very calmly, which is, which is absolutely fantastic. Right, aware of timings and aware that we've not really spoken much about your pal Damien yet. And we spoke with Damien recently, and he was across this year. He was he was actually speaking about what was this the snacks he was speaking about, Stephen? Can you remember them?
Sonic. Was that the name of the takeaway place that
Yeah,
you took him to? Some
yeah. So he
cinnamon rolls.
Yeah, he was quite taken by Sonic, one of
Yeah.
the fast food restaurants there in town. One of only a few in Wartburg itself. He also discovered. Well, I got him to try quite a bit of snack food and some little Debbie cakes and whatnot. I think he was most taken by Nutter Butters, which is just this little peanut butter kind of sandwich cookie sandwich. They're actually vegan as well, so that they worked quite well for him.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. It sounds like he's
Perfect.
having quite a bit of a buffet when he was out there, which is fine. That's good to
Yeah.
try all these
Absolutely.
different things.
I
Yeah.
know, because is there a food that you miss most about the UK? As you said, salt and vinegar crisps, and blackcurrant squash is another one that I've heard you speak about.
Yeah, Damien also brought me a supply of jelly babies. Those will I'll keep those safe for my next few races here. We don't have any, we have a lot of gummy snacks, but nothing quite like those. So that's
Yeah.
definitely one that I miss.
And when
And
you were in the UK, what was the one that you missed most uh, from back home?
Little Debbie cakes for
Well,
sure,
is that right?
and specifically the oatmeal cream pies are just this this perfect ultra running food. It's a soft, packaged sandwich, essentially. 2 oatmeal cookies, but very soft ones. I mean, would definitely pass the British definition of cookie rather than biscuit, with a cream layer of cream in between them, and so they're soft. They go in a pack well. They don't get smashed or crumbly. They do well whether it's hot or cold. It's just about the right number of calories, so it's a really good running food.
It's the sweet spot. Thank you.
Soon as we finish this, I'm going to read the biscuit bar because I'm absolutely starving after listening to that description.
You're always starving, John.
I am. Listen, I'm very much aware of timings, and thank you very much, John, for being with us for this time. But we've got a few questions that we definitely want to get in the bag before we let you go. What's your favourite way to relax outside of running?
What's that?
How many kids have you got?
Yeah. So it's four kids. My wife and I will enjoy an episode of. This is about the only time I watch TV, really. My wife and I might enjoy an episode of something when after the kids have gone to bed. Right now we're doing Ted Lasso, a Mandalorian. I've had, before races, going back like, I don't know, 8 years or so, the night before a race, I try to relax with an episode of Star Trek. But I'm actually running out of Star Trek episodes at this point, so I'll have to find something to switch to.
Okay, cool. Bit of TV. That's cool. No problem. And one of the things, sorry, Stephen, Dialect Dictionary. That's your gig, man.
The door is open. John, we ask all our guests for a contribution into our dialect dictionary, a word or phrase that from where you come from something you've picked up along the way, something that's a bit unusual and quirky, a bit like Laz.
Yeah, so this one is a bit. I saw this just before the show, and it's a bit tough because you never fully realize which words are local dialect until you go somewhere else and say it, and people are like, "What?
Yeah.
What now?" I do remember when Damien was here about a week before the race, and there were a few I had to define for him. One of them was fixins, which are just like a side item. You get a restaurant, and you get a side of hash browns or green beans or okra, which that's okra's another. I had to define that, but that's fixins. But I'd say I think this is local dialect. Correct me if you use this there, but yonder. Do you use yonder? So this is a great one for running. It basically just means like over there. Like someone asks you, where something is, and you say, "Oh, it's just over yonder." It's an arbitrary distance, not close by. You can point in any direction. If it's really far, you might say it's way over yonder.
Brilliant. We do use yonder here, but you know what? The way you've described that is fantastic.
Yeah, ours is more yonder, and I heard yonder. Is it the same word?
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's one of the you never know. You never really know how you spell slang words.
That's part of the beauty.
There's the y'all and all y'all and bless your heart. Ones like that I feel like are kind of the
Yins.
more well known. No, yins is a Pittsburgh thing.
Oh yeah, that's what Larry told us. That was his contribution.
Yeah.
That's a Pittsburgh thing. Oh, sorry, that's over the county line or whatever.
No,
I lived in Pittsburgh for 5 years, but
right.
that is actually, that's another important distinction to make that I had to make often when I was in the UK. In the UK, y'all refer to Americans as Yankees. Here in the American South, we refer to Northerners as Yankees, and mostly in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
So when y'all call an American Southerner a Yankee, that might not go over well.
It'd spark something off.
Yeah.
Lesson learned, John. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. And
It's an education.
our last question is a musical one. We have a playlist, and actually we're starting a new playlist. It's called the LaBeouf Buff Collection. This will be volume, is this 5, Stephen? It's coming up.
It will be, yeah, because
It'll
we're
be
into a new season.
a new season. Volume 5 is coming up. The first pick on it was a certain Damien Hall, picked a track. So yours will be going in at number 2. Not necessarily mean it will be the second, but it may be it may end up at number 1. But what track would you like to add into the playlist, John?
Yeah, so I saw this one just before as well, and my mind immediately went to kind of Red Hot Chili Peppers and some of the things that I listen to a lot before races or before. I don't listen to anything while I run, but going all the way back to high school, that's one of the things I listen to beforehand. But then I figured there probably aren't many opportunities for y'all to get a country song on your playlist. So I think I'm going to add Mountain Music by Alabama, which is a country song, and of course appropriate to the theme here. So it's
Brilliant.
get some good country exposure there. I was always disappointed by the lack of country radio stations when I was over there. There would be occasionally a Dolly Parton song, like it would come on in between Stormzy songs or something, just out of nowhere. You'd hear 9 to 5, and but otherwise, yeah, not much country music.
Well, we are just about to change that, John Kelly. We're going to unleash that song to the Young Hearts Run Free listeners, and I'm sure they will play their part in increasing that as well. I'm very much aware of timings. We've never really even spoken about the Pennine Way, so I think we're going to have to come back. If you'd be kind enough to agree to come back, we can do that. We can do that another time.
We'll be capping on your direct messages again, John.
Yeah, we've got
sure.
We've got your email address now, so
Sure thing. That this is I only had the one Tunnock's teacake though, so I'll be out of supplies for another episode. I can pick up another Irn Bru, but I haven't found the teacakes anywhere.
we'll find a way to get them to you.
We'll get your mailing address. We have special ways and means of supplying Tunnocks to our favourite people.
And also, just as a way of a teaser, we can also get caramel logs and caramel wafers. They're the Tunnock's tea cake family.
So yeah, talking.
We can do that. We can do that. John, thank you so much for giving us your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you. It's been on our list for a long, long time. So this is the Young Hearts Run Free boys achieving a wee dream today. So thank you very much. I'll pass over to Stephen just to wrap us up.
No, it sure is. We've been really looking forward to this chat, and it's not disappointed. It's been an absolute honour to speak to you. I've got one last question for you, and it was actually a question that Larry posed us, and it was a thought provoker, and it kind of links back to something that you said at the start about you also have done a full Ironman. Yeah.
Yeah, I had a number of years where I was did triathlons in the summer and ultras in the winter. I went to before I retired from my triathlon career, I went pro for one Ironman race, just to have the experience and say I did.
So Larry said that he heard that one lap of Barkley is tougher than a full Ironman. One lap.
Well, I mean,
in the fog, in the wind, in the rain.
Well, I don't think I've ever done a Barkley loop faster than my typical Ironman time. So if you're just going by time, then yeah, there's that. But at least you don't usually have to swim at Barkley. Maybe a couple of swelling creeks, but I just never could get the swimming part. I was horrible at that. So I guess it all depends on your definition of tough there.
Okay. Thank you for that. No, it's been an absolute pleasure, John, and thanks so much for giving up your time so generously. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you all. I enjoyed it.